Okay, so this session is going to be on the bottlenecks and challenges in drug discovery. So the contents of this pre-recorded material is looking at the challenges in drug discovery and development, and also the complex problem of requiring something called multi-pronged strategies. So these include like complete paradigm shift and something called the open innovation model, which is important in kind of developing a drug discovery idea. Also the marketing strategy. So this is a focus on valued therapeutic classes and personalized medicine. Also the biological complexity, so kind of related to balancing drugs, toxicity and safety. Also something that's really important is the scientific insight, so things like the pathophysiology, mechanisms of action, and the physical chemical profiles. Also going to look at kind of technology advances and biomarker utilization, and the model-based drug development and also adaptive design. The main bottlenecks in drug discovery. This involves a multitude of things. If we look at this chart, when we're testing project planning, we have to consider different aspects. So for example, I'll just take my pointer. If we're looking at the compound throughput, how quickly can we make the compounds, so the rate of production? Can we make enough of the compounds? What is the cost per compound, so the reagent? Is there a data point? And how much does that cost if we're testing? How much the compound is available? So that kind of leads us back to compound throughput, and how much is needed in the testing rounds. How long will it take to do the tests? So the time will also contribute to the cost. Silence of the result. So is it absolute, desirable, or non-desirable? Okay, so these are kind of things that we have to think about. And also, what is the probability that the compound will fail? Can we predict that? And this will have to be done both at the lead optimization and also in the in vivo studies. So what's been happening in the last 60 years? Well, productivity has actually remained pretty flat, despite how much money is being spent in research and development. We can see in these graphs that the productivity has actually remained flat. We can see that some of the main companies, so for example Merck, Lilly and Roche, they are increasing the amount of money, well, they're increasing the number of small molecules over the years. You can see by 2007 they have a cumulative number of about 50 small molecule new molecular entities. If we take a look at how much money is being spent, we can see here we've got on this axis here we've got new drug approvals and also the amount of money that's being spent. We can see that regardless of how much is being spent, this line is actually staying flat. There isn't any new drugs being approved, but the technology or the research is actually costing more. So there's some current realities for big pharma. So the recent drug development process is long, can take up to 10 years or even longer. It's risky, so there is a lot of high risk. We don't know if it's going to work or not. It's expensive and is actually increasingly complex. And in fact, what we believe is that when we've kind of picked those kind of low-hanging fruits, the other fruits, the more difficult to reach fruits, if we can imagine the drugs or those fruits in the tree, those more difficult drugs to reach are going to be, it's going to take longer, it's going to be more expensive to get to that goal. Also, Something to kind of bear in mind is that the regulatory processes. So there is actually many hurdles regarding this, according to kind of health law, and these are actually changing by the year as we kind of develop the drugs. Even the patents on the drugs on many of the high revenue products are expiring. So once the patent has been agreed, there's 20 years of possible, you can sell the drug independently, but after that time, the patent then comes out after 20 years and another company can come along and sell your drug. The marketplace is highly competitive. There are many companies trying to do what you're doing, and the reinvestment environment is increasingly restrictive. Also, public support and image can sometimes remain low. So we can imagine that current drug discovery is a bit like this picture is looking for that needle in the haystack. Where can we find it? So as we said, that the drug development process is long and it's expensive. And it can take up to 10 to 15 to 20 years to reach that product. We start off with, so let's kind of go through those different phases. We start off with the idea, the concept of the idea, okay? There is actually probably 4 to 5 years spent working on the discovery. This is when actually a lot of money is going to be put into that phase. And then afterwards we have the exploratory development and then the full development. And this is made up of different phases. We've got phase 1, phase 2 and phase 3. And at each stage there is like a check to see that everything is going well, and at any of these stages these drugs can fail to reach the market. The ones that do go through, again, they still have to be licensed and accepted by the regulatory affairs. And it's a high-risk process and can cost like billions of dollars to reach that goal. So can this trend continue? Can we continue to develop drugs in this way? We have to have, obviously, these regulatory steps, but let's examine the various pressures that have converged in the industry. Research and development output. What happens when the patent runs out? Well, when the patent runs out, you lose the ability to kind of market that drug as your own, and other companies can then make that drug as a generic drug. There's also the rising cost of healthcare, both in the UK and the worldwide. So there may not be enough money to pay for these drugs. So you've got to make the drugs cost effective for the healthcare to buy these drugs. Also, there's a regulatory environment, and that's known as the MHRA, which is the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency. Business as usual. Is this an option? So we've got this patent cliff, which is a problem. And in fact, 36 blockbuster drugs, which have an annual sales of around about 1 billion, saw that patents expire between 2009 and 2012. Now, that's something that we're experiencing obviously in the UK, but the worldwide sales for these products actually exceeded 100 billion. There's also third-party payers, which are demanding demonstration of the therapeutic and or the economic advantages over all the competitive products. So these including kind of non-therapeutic options. This is actually increasingly challenging in the drug market, and improvements in safety profile is no longer sufficient to get on the market. And also the bar now has been raised by the regulatory authorities for approval. So what is innovation? How do we see innovation? Well, innovation means different things to different people. To scientists, it means kind of obviously discovering something new, maybe a new mechanism, finding something very novel in their experiments. For patent law attorneys, it will mean something obviously very different. To consumers and customers, again, that's also something very different, had very different ideas, and also third-party payers as well. When we look at research versus innovation, research is about transforming knowledge into information, so that's its goal. There isn't that goal to kind of make money, whilst innovation is transforming that knowledge into products to create like a value for the consumer, but also is to bring home some profit. So the medicinal product innovation, so this is the chemistry, so the structure, the drug class, the method of synthesis, the process, the formulation, the pharmacokinetics, the pharmacodynamics, and the pharmacogenetic. The consumer, this is the patient, the physician, the third-party payer, including healthcare systems and the government. Innovation, so novelty. So novelty and newness are quite distinct concepts. So newness implies there's a new creation, so for example, a new chemical entity. A novelty can be a new chemical entity, or it can be a new use for a known compound, or maybe there's a new method or formulation of making that compound. So from a patent standpoint, it must be something that is not kind of non-obvious, to be someone who's skilled in the art. Whilst novelty and newness is a key component of innovation. So when we look at innovation, unless it's an invention which is useful, is actually not innovative. And this table shows us kind of looking at the perspective of different people or different organizations, and whether or not what's the usefulness of that therapeutic innovation. So for patients, they would like to have improved healthcare. So you'd have improved survival, improve the quality of life, including relieving the symptoms with no side effects or adverse reactions, and it's also convenient. For the doctors who are prescribing and also the healthcare systems, it's more satisfactory and is a more efficient healthcare. For society as a whole, it's increased communal health and wealth. We have more jobs and support for elderly and a better environment. For the government, there's an increased income, improved economy, and an improved health of the nation. And then for the pharmaceutical company, they want to have reduced production costs and increased profits from sales. So from this, the utility of innovation depends on the perspective of the user. And have a look at this source here. It's in Nature Reviews and Drug Discovery from 2012. So what we've been looking at is that, okay, we've been putting more money into research and development, but the number of new molecular entities coming through is kind of flatlining. It's not really increasing. But there is actually this declining trend in research and development efficiency. So this may be a key of why we're not developing more and more drugs. For example, if we look at the number of drugs per billion of dollars spent in research and development. What we can see that from about 1950 to 2010, that there's been this kind of decline happening. And this may be kind of related to policies and regulations, but in fact we can see so around about between 1960 and 1970, the FDA tightens regulation of post-phthalimide, which caused those terrible birth defects in pregnant women. Between 1990 and 2000, there was this first wave of biotechnology-derived therapies. And just before 2000, the FDA clears a backlog following something called the PDUFA regulations. Plus, there was small bolus of HIV drugs. But you can see that there is this downward trend in the efficiency of research and development. Also, there are drugs which are either come to end of their patent, and there are a number of drugs on the market that have actually come to the end of their patent. So in 2010 to 2013, there are a number of drugs which were bringing in quite a lot of profit for these companies, and you can see that in 2010 the total was around about 647 million dollars. And you can see that in 2012 there was the most sales being brought in. But if we look at these drugs at 2013, you can see that the total sales being brought in has reduced. And that's due to a lot of these drugs coming towards the end of the patent, and that other companies can then make the same drugs that cost less. So pharma actually leads in the drug discovery, but it doesn't actually lead in innovation. Of the 252 drugs that the FDA approved between 1997 and 2008, pharmaceutical companies discovered around about 58%, whilst biotechnology firms discovered around 18%. And in fact, there are a good proportion of drugs being discovered by universities, by academia, and this is around about 24%. However, the pharma actually lags on the discovery of innovative drugs, and this only accounts for 46% of treatments designated for priority review and 44% of drugs with a novel mechanism or action. In fact, universities or academia and also small kind of biotechnology firms play a bigger role in the innovation process. So what would Einstein do? So this is a quote from Einstein. So the significant problems we face today cannot be solved at the same level of thinking we were at when we created them. Taking this in mind, there is actually a complex situation that requires innovative approaches to reduce the research and development costs and the clinical trial cycle time, and also the attrition rate of these drugs. That ends the first part of this session. Please move on to the second session.